used Nile Master Notes for the 2025 draft video edition because I had promised I would make a video edition, and I had to live up to that promise. And now we're here. We're gonna go through the entire class and all of my notes on the class's most prevalent players with the insights on my process and how I got to my board that was different in one specific way and in a lot of other ways as well as most others. Me doing this is important as it's, well, I already have all the notes actually. Like they're already all published online, but it's important that I produce this video because I said I was going to do it, and that making a video like this allows me to share a bit more insight into my process and how I get to different outcomes than consensus does. And I think that it's ends up being the right process as well. For anybody who this is their first time spending time with my work, I appreciate that. But this is my I'm Nile from NileHoopers. That's my bio and my whole setup on Twitter. NileHoopers that's my name, and my whole life is consistent. That's my header. That's what Shavonte said. 47, 30-point game last season. The thrill of competition, data only, NBA draft, basketball team building and rotations. As much as I like the NBA draft, I think that I differ from some people in this space in that I also do lots of interesting research and have interest in most levels of basketball, especially at the professional level in college, which is basically a professional level now. Excuse me. And as far as building rosters, building teams, maximizing lineup construction, stuff like that, is really important to me, and doing it at both the pro and college levels. Building teams is my fascination. Data only, that does indicate that I do not use film-based analysis in my outcome in my research ever, because some people can watch film. Like if you only do prospect evaluations for the NBA draft, for example, or from the high school to college level, that transition, watching film is a bit more viable because you're looking for traits that would indicate what a single player, or the ways that a single player can affect the game. Whereas with my fascination with team building, a single player can only affect the game so much, and in that, on a team basis, when building a roster, building a lineup, watching a player do their individual tasks, or not tasks, but when you observe a player's individual footprint on a basketball court, it is somewhere between unlikely and impossible that one will be able to correctly surmise exactly how sustainably valuable or invaluable what a single player is doing without having a photographic memory and being able to analyze what all 10 players are doing on the court at the same time for thousands of possessions. That is what a player's or a team's statistical footprint is for. That is the way to actually analyze these ideas in the most efficient way possible, without over-indexing on a specific trait that could be visually stimulating, actually ensuring that what a player is doing is influential on winning games is mandatory, as opposed to simply observing what's if there some sort of a micro trait that's only available or only prevalent with watching a player. So that's why I focus strictly on data and not on really any film based study in my process. Also, I do some on the court, and I had the genius idea that since I couldn't really think of a more creative way to communicate my ideas about my draft board, I'm not sure I had published one up until that point, is that I would need to make a YouTube video explaining it. Then I went on to just write my master draft notes. So that is 15,000 views that post does. That's so many. If it only would have gotten like 500 views, I would have deleted it, full honesty, and I would not have done this. But too many people saw it, and people have been asking for it since then. And this is with this NBA season starting right now, this was a good time to double back and give the opportunity to speak on the way that not only I created my board and all of the evaluation I used pre-draft, but also any insights that have been gained from Summer League and preseason rolling into this season. This is my draft board. That first player is not Cooper Flagg. I'm the only person whose board was recorded, to my knowledge. I think the only person, period, who did not have Cooper Flagg as the best player in this class. We'll spend a lot of time on that during the video. Maybe saying it out loud will help more people to understand. I know my notes, a lot of people read them actually, but saying it out loud, and I feel like could help my case as well. The rest of my board is as follows. We'll run through. We should speak on mostly all of the players in the first three tiers, as well as any players who are drafted in the fourth and fifth tiers. Any other undrafted players may not be mentioned, but I will mention one player, and that's Caleb Love. And I really like Caleb Love. I think if you go and look at his scoring profile, he has the outside of like rim finishing, because that's like a big hindrance on his game, but it's all self-created. He shoots like a lot of threes at volume. I think he measured really well at the combine as well. I'm a fan of Caleb Love. I guess his name just caught my eye when I was looking there. All 4 years, high major, high school ranking. I went past it now, so we're just gonna move on. 4 players that I had in my top three tiers went undrafted. That would be Kadary Richmond, who I had 18, Chris Manon, who I had 22, Oumar Ballo, who I had 25, and Dylan Cardwell, who I had 31. Kadary Richmond is a player that I spent a lot of time with his profile, probably to the point of potentially over-indexing, but I didn't, because I showed my work. Every reason that Kadary Richmond could be doubted can also be very clearly explained, as I did in my work anatomy of a missed layup. He broke his hand in the pre-draft process, like early, so he only worked out for like 1 or 2 teams to my best knowledge, and he's a player who I think would have just like shooting in an empty gym would have convinced someone, because everyone says that he's improving his jump shot. Rick Pitino, I think that was his coach at St. John's, who runs some offenses that aren't that don't allow for the highest levels of 2-point efficiency, while Kadary Richmond already was a suspect rim finisher below the rim. But it was all self-created, and in an off-ball role in the league where he's one of the best two-way playmakers in the world, really, or like out at a very high level at that. Yeah, if he could have gotten to shoot in an empty gym and proved that he's improving his jump shot, even just at a what is the word I want to use? Like at a fake level, like at an artificial level. It didn't actually even matter if it translated to games. If he just had to show that he could make shots to someone who would be able to select him. But we didn't get that opportunity. We're currently on. I can't tell if he's on a two-way or an Exhibit 10 contract with the Washington Wizards, and I would argue he is their fourth best prospect. No, fifth best prospect on the team, who's like has like 8 or 9 prospects, and he was undrafted free agent. Two of them were lottery picks, like high lottery. That would be Alex Sarr and Trey Johnson, and I don't think Kadary Richmond is better than Tristan Vukovic or Kai-Sean George. Probably not Kai-Sean George. I think that he's probably done enough as a pro to say that he's better. Chris Manon, I have a post from pre-season 2024 that's, looks at his numbers when he was still at Cornell, playing like like 20 minutes a game, and he's just a premier playmaker, one of the best defensive playmakers in basketball for sure. Creates like pick six turnovers. That's kind of his main offensive diet, is turning defense into offense. He also is like a capable passer. He transferred up this season to Vanderbilt and was the most impactful, I would probably just say best player on that team for a tournament team, as well as other concepts. He's in my notes I have him as a very unique player as far as his skills and weaknesses. There just aren't a lot of players who provide exactly his imprint on the game, which I feel like is something that I value. The rarity of a prospect is an underrated trait that I can sometimes over-index on, but I think it's important to have players to be interested in a player who is the only person who can provide what they specifically do as a way to weaponize and create versatility on a basketball team, which I believe is extremely, well, I believe is pretty important. I guess it's not extremely important to have a multifaceted and versatile team if the opposite is like an extremely stylized like machine of a basketball team, which is, I guess I don't agree with actually. Skill versatility is important. I take that idea back because I just thought of a team that uses the robotic method, the Boston Celtics, and I don't inherently appreciate their process as far as that goes. So Chris Manon being a weapon that being an unmatched weapon is really important to me. That's why I had him 22 in the class. Another thing, it's it's stated now by research by a few different people, most importantly my dog Colton, that in a single draft class there are about, historically at least over the recent history, there are in a draft class only between 16 and 22, something like that, like actual NBA players who have sustained careers and play, X number of minutes as a professional NBA player. I argued on my board, on my first one, not this one, that this class and maybe 2024, maybe not. This class specifically is the one that benefits most from adding NBA level talent from the college level based on based on like the end of like players using their COVID years and NIL retaining better college players for longer. But with no more COVID years, that might be over, and it might balance out back again next year or not. It could just be more of a trend now that basketball players are better, and there will be less like end of roster churn because there are better players who will be retained at a more with more focus. So to have 32 players in my first three tiers, that's what it indicates, that these are players who I believe will play some substantial minute counts in the NBA, or will be of the capabilities of doing so. Even if they don't play when they are in the game, they'll play at the skill level of a impactful NBA player. So that's four guys. Oumar, Ballo, Dylan, Cardwell are both like two very large bigs who let's pull notes. Oumar Ballo, he's on this one. Oumar Ballo, everyone hated him and he went undrafted probably because he wasn't even on the top 100 consensus board. Like, no one thinks that this is even like a professional player, even though he's been reported at 7'5" wingspan, which is like the number you want to get to play big in the NBA. His offensive rebound, he's basically just like a genuinely very hard player to guard due to his physical stature, which is how we should be evaluating players. I have a query here in the notes where we're looking for single seasons with a 10 offensive rebound percentage, a 60 free throw rate, and doing this in 40 dunks while having less than 3.5 fouls per 40 minutes, which speaks to the ability to weaponize size by dunking, drawing fouls, and being generally hard to guard, and crashing the glass while being foul averse enough to like play on the court and not have to get like pulled for being in foul trouble all the time. I think we'll get to my thoughts on fouls in basketball deeper into it, but I go back and forth on if a player fouling or not fouling is a valuable trait. For a super senior, though, it is probably a more impressive to not commit fouls, because at that point you should already be able to position yourself in a way where that isn't as much trouble. Oumar Ballo completed this the aforementioned query 3 times out of 20 players or 20 seasons of this instance throughout the Bardovic era, which is 10, 15, that's 15 years. And he did it 3 times of the 20 times that it's happened. And most of the other players are NBA players or like most of them are just NBA players actually, or professional players, but also none of them are 7 foot, 7'5" 7'7" wingspan. Oh my gosh, and 280 pounds. My notes specifically say he is an elite rebounder on both ends and is one of the better defensive rim deterrent bigs in college basketball. His block numbers, I believe, on his career never are too high. Yeah, no, he's never just like an extreme rim protector, but in being as large as he is, the ability to simply deter the rim is just as important as blocking shots, especially blocking shots like out of bounds. Recovered blocks are more valuable. Blocks don't all have the same value, but deterring the rim is just as important, if not more important, to my defensive philosophy in evaluating bigs. Ballo's team success, yes. On defense, the low block percentage, I commented on this in the notes, is strategic, like his peers, Ryan Kalkbrenner and Zach Edey, who were both would be found on the aforementioned query as well. Players of such offensive importance to their teams cannot chase blocks, as the risk of fouling out is the difference between winning and losing for their teams. In 2022, Oumar Ballo was of less importance to Arizona, sharing front court minutes with Christian Koloko and Azuolas Tubelis, and he was able to chase blocks and foul with heavier volume, where he posted a 7 block percentage, which is on the higher end than his career percentage, which was probably like 5%, because he was able to just run around and swat shots. But he also didn't get as many defensive rebounds that season, which is a positioning thing that is observable in a statistical profile. Excuse me. I did some research. Oh yeah, that he can't shoot free throws as a big who I believe is gonna play his rookie NBA season at age 23 or 24, which is usually like kind of an advanced age to not be able to shoot free throws. But poor free throw shooters have like a okay hit rate, like 50, maybe a little more than 50% as professionals. Poor NCAA free throw shooters, and the way that they translate to the professional ranks is something that I researched in Anatomy of a Missed Layup, not about Kadary Richmond, but about the St. Mary's big Mitchell Saxon, because he also is a player who I was a pretty big fan of. Not enough to have him in as a top, projected as an NBA player, but someone who I believed could play some level if a team wanted to give him a chance. I think that he has some NBA traits, but he couldn't shoot free throws either. I did the research. Bigs who go deeper into their college careers can't shoot free throws. They make it work at a pretty solid rate, to the point where, assuming that Oumar Ballo can improve as a shooter, is within reason to me. And if even as long as he gets to a playable level, I believe that the rest of his traits would constitute an NBA player. Dylan Cardwell, I've been a fan of for like at least like all of 2 years. His skill intersection of find specifically exactly how I want to suggest this. Dylan Cardwell can't shoot at all. He shoots free throws even worse than Oumar Ballo. He's an elite rim protector. From the outside of that, he's one of the best playmaking bigs in the class. This is somewhat based on Bruce Pearl's Auburn offense, allowing for bigs to have pretty solid passing numbers historically, but he's also an extremely good rebounder, extremely good rim protector. Shot 70% at the rim on his career, with, I believe, the highest dunk rate that I have on record. So that speaks to the ability to shoot a shot very frequently. That's like a 99% finish. And that's offensive value within itself, along with being an elite offensive rebounder and a plus passer at a position that where that is a ceiling raiser for a prospect's impact on the game. His actual like handle and like playmaking and stuff isn't all that prevalent. Excuse me. But yeah, Dylan Cardwell. He measured like a little bit smaller than I would have hoped as far as his height was concerned. But it looks like he could start for the Sacramento Kings with Sabonis out to start the season, and I think that he could end up just being fully in their rotation pretty soon because of his statistical profile. We can move. That's all for my undrafted free agents who all should have been drafted, if not in the first round, with priority in the second round. And we can now move on to the lottery. And on my board. Okay, now I can't do anything. The lottery that I had would not have looked like the one that took place in the NBA, but we can see here that the rankings of from left to right. On the left is my rank of all the players that were taken in the lottery. Right to that is their actual draft slot, which is what we're basing the next few minutes off of. From there, this is the player's name, and finally to the far right is the difference between where I designated the player on my board and where they were selected. Based off of the ordered actual outcome of the draft in my evaluation, there are 4 players. You can see the difference between my slot and their real draft slot was quite extreme. And these are players who I would lean to projecting disappointing careers based off of their draft slot. We'll get to that when we get to the players. There were 5 players that I believe were drafted about where, like within reason, if not a little bit higher than where I would have personally valued them. But this could be these are differences that could potentially not be not end up with the player being remembered as some sort of a failure or disappointment by their team. They can still present very positive value that's remembered or that's thought of positively. There were Derek Queen and Colin Murray Boyle specifically were drafted about exactly where I would have personally valued them, to the point where they may have been the best player on the board when they were taken. Is that true for Queen? I think so. Maybe I don't know how to count. No, it's impossible that it was true for Queen because my number 4 prospect got selected behind him, so that doesn't make any sense. That's all right though. That's if that pick is within reason to a degree. And then there were 3 players, who I believe will return very positive value from their draft slot and will be thought of as the steals of the class, with those being Kaman Malawach, Noah Singh, and Carter Bryant. We will use the actual draft order. Oh man, 30 minutes in, we're just getting to the fucking draft. That's not good. We'll use the actual draft order as the work for this, or as the basis of the video, with the number 1 consensus pick by every single person on Earth, except for me, Cooper Flagg. Oh man, that's crazy. The title of this slide is Coopto Flagger Jr., which is an allusion to Otto Porter Jr., who I believe is not the best comparison for Cooper Flagg. That would be misstating it, but he is a very prevalent and very important point of comparison for Cooper Flagg. In my notes, to a point, I'll just read the first paragraph it's the same as this, really. My consistent denial of Flagg as a generational S-tier prospect was initiated after about 2 weeks of NCAA play, when his suboptimal shot profile, paired with underwhelming shot making and mediocre ball security versus Maine, Army, Wofford, and the University of Seattle, indicated he did not project as an offensive engine in the NBA. I made like a Google, like a Google Docs, where I charted basically what other like number one prospects who went on to still be top 5 picks, like retained mostly if not all of their hype, how the beginning of the season, how issues at the beginning of the season, not issues, but how the beginning of their college careers aligned with Flagg's. I don't. You can read that. I guess I'll run through it actually. You don't have to read anything. Cool, because yeah, I put notes on it. That's good. On Cooper Flagg, I found, there's a query where basically Cooper Flagg was not a very efficient 2-point scorer. He didn't shoot enough 3-pointers, and his offensive rebound rate wasn't high enough to be a big, and he didn't draw enough fouls also as well to be a big. So now we're pretty hard locked at a wing. Something that, if you don't follow my work, I believe that wings are probably the most overrated archetype in basketball. Even though some of the best players in basketball are wings, to search and hunt for a wing to be a star is usually a failure of procedure. Running through the sheet that I prepared, my biggest fear is that his ineffective shot selection continues further into the season. Attempting as many non-rim attempts as shots at the rim would weaken his statistical output, lowering his offensive rebound percentage, free throw rate, and likely Duke's offensive success rate, all of which are comparatively low to the early games of his top 3 freshman draft pick predecessors. The first 2, offensive rebound and free throw rate, those ended up being kind of middling for Flagg. The free throw rate, we'll talk about that later, but not their offensive success rate. Duke's offense was pretty damn good this year, so that wasn't an issue. That wasn't a way that his shot selection affected the team. Percentages are of minor importance in early season evaluation, but he did not make shots against Q4 teams. So, and usually very elite prospects dominate mediocre competition. Flagg did go on to dominate mediocre competition, with that being the 2025 rendition of the ACC. There were teams in the ACC that, like, half of it was like terrible, maybe more than half. It wasn't not an extremely competitive conference like a prospect who played in the SEC or the Big Ten would have faced this year. It was like clearly the worst Power 5 conference in basketball. I think I would say. Anything else in here? The rest of it is just actually the numbers and ranks of Flagg in his of the players. How many players is it? I should have put out of what? Whatever. Usage-based assists, just very mid-start to the season. His issues with Maury ball shot diet, which would be shots that are at the rim and 3-pointers. This issue persisted for the entire season. Aside from shot diet issues, Cooper Flagg also struggled heavily finishing at the rim. His rim finishing was rather poor. His layup percentage, which would be his rim numbers without dunks, was 52%. Players that, as we see, shoot 50, I created a chart in my draft master notes that was a query for players 6'7" or over who attempted 140 shots at the rim and shot lower than 65% at the rim in their freshman season, high major and went on to play in the NBA. The best rim finisher at their peak of all of these players in their career, there are, I don't know how many players are on, maybe like 15 or something like that. Most of them are like poor rim finishers in the league. Some of them got to like average. Only Jabari Parker, Mo Harkless, and Naz Reid ever reached like of above average of any substance, and it's really just average. Um, some of the more important names to mention are Brandon Miller, who is currently negative 1.6% relative true shooting on finishing play types, which are those on cuts, in transition, on putbacks, and also as a pick and roll roller. And this data specifically is from the NBA RIPM website. Most of these players also generally struggled on offense. The highest offensive DPM, which is the Darko plus minus from the Darko website. You know, the chart, the site with the chart where it's has a big curve and it's career DPM. That the highest that any of these players ever reached was Jabari Parker with 66, and he was like the worst defensive, one of the worst defensive like wing bigs that you could find. So that wasn't enough. Kevon Looney completely changed his game. He's a very hard point of comparison. Most of these prospects of players who shot 3-pointers as well, like with good 3-point volume. RJ Barrett, poor rim finisher, poor offensive player in the league. 125th is his peak offensive DPM ranking. Brandon Miller, Kyle Filipowski, Anthony Black. Wow, that's really bad. His Anthony Black peak has so far in his career peaked at 558th offensive Darko plus minus rank, which is pretty much as bad as it gets. And this is because of being a slightly below average rim finisher, as well as like not having a jumper really at all. But none of these players Jaylen Brown reached 19th. His is like easily the highest, but that was all usage based, and most offensive metrics are skewed kind of too far about usage to me. But that's neither here nor there really. But what I do believe that these examples, these pertinent examples, attest to is that Cooper Flagg probably will struggle as a rim finisher in the NBA, especially as a younger player, which sounds common, but when we're talking about number one picks that are generational prospects that every single person knows is the number one pick and is primed to make multiple all-star, all-NBA games, I think that being more critical is important, and it's not something that people are always open to doing because it goes against the consensus. I'm not sure how much better Cooper Flagg can get at rim finishing. Finishing at the rim at Duke is one of the easiest things to possibly do. The spacing, the shooting, the other talent on the floor, that all comes with its own gravity. He will not play, especially on any team, but especially on the Mavericks, who are going to play him with two bigs mostly all the time, because they paid two bigs, because they pay four bigs, like a total of like $200-300 million total on their contracts, to play big, and Cooper Flagg is now paid to play wing, where he never really played at Duke. At Duke, he was a four. I think this is his most optimized position as a four, playing with three other ball handlers, which sounds like a lot of players' optimal position. Like if you're both, if you are the primary handler who also has all of these release valves, if shit gets spooky for you, I feel like everybody could play in that. So I'm not exactly sure how offensively, what is the term, portable that Flagg will be, especially with the shot diet that is not optimized to shoot heavy 3-point volume, and the playmaking volume is heavily based on like on-ball usage as opposed to like quick reads. Not that Flagg has poor feel or that he's a bad passer. I hope that I never say that about him because I'd be lying. But in his specific situation, as well as the fact that he already weighs 220 pounds, usually adding weight is where players improve their rim finishing as you're stronger and you don't get like bumped off your spot as much, stuff like that. Flagg, like 220 pounds at 18 is already pretty damn big, and I think it only insinuates that Flagg will have to get even bigger to be able to finish at the rim. And I wonder what athleticism losses could come if he has to play, let's say, at 240 pounds just to be a positive rim finisher. Could he even what it's just a very risky thing. It's not even the same player at that point. And if you have to become a completely new player as the number one pick who's a generational prospect, then were we ever really that in the first place? Or were we just a very good prospect who had a lot of on-ball usage and was solid in that on-ball usage in as good or as optimized as a situation exists possible for a player? So here we have a graph. From my shot diet chart, excuse me, it's not a graph at all. Where Flagg is with other underclass. This is kind of stupid. I don't really need to say this. Other underclassmen. Actually, you can just read it if it's in the video. Sorted by dunk rate. No, dunks per rim attempt. Excuse me. Flagg dunked like a solid amount, but once again, a lot of this was usage. His actual dunk per rim attempt. So he wasn't just like dunking everything, which some would say, oh, he was doing it self-created off the dribble. If I don't really care that much, because if you can't do it on the same diet that you have, if you have to be scaled off the ball to increase your dunk rate or to sustain your dunk rate, then once again, this in what you're projected to do, you can't say, or I think that it's unfair to argue that a player can be both praised for the way that they or that you can fill in the blanks from both sides. Basically, you can't say that the player is getting all these self-created rim attempts, and that's why they're not dunking, but also, excuse me, that the player is this on-ball self-creator like that. I'm not exactly sure how that goes together. Moving forward, the inability to score from two plus a reluctance to shoot threes while being potentially forced. But this is about his translation to professional level. It's been kind of the conversation since he got drafted that the team wants to like play him at point guard and kind of just force a lot of on-ball usage on him early. And I have varying degrees of confidence in that working, especially for a team that is actually trying to win now because they have Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving. They have a team that is otherwise on the more talented side, and the number one pick should be able to elevate them to winning now as opposed to later. But the path that would best suit Cooper Flagg's development as an on-ball creator is not one that I believe will come. Like, those things don't go together. I don't think that you can develop Cooper Flagg as an on-ball playmaker and also win games because your offense is probably going to be too bad. At worst case scenario, his scoring efficiency will crater like it did in the combination of his summer league and preseason samples. While also, when you force super young players to have the ball in their hands all the time, they stop playing defense and getting rebounds because it's very tiring to run offense in the NBA. And not only tiring, but it's I feel like most of it is tiring, but it's also you're just not in the same positions because teams usually do not use their primary on-ball playmaker as a major defensive weapon. I don't know how much I believe this, and I never went back and looked into it because the only way to see it is on Synergy, and I don't like using Synergy for player evaluations anymore because everybody doesn't have access to it, and I believe it's a cheat code in that if I can't explain my ideas without using concepts that are available and open to everyone, then I'm basically just trying to talk over people and be smarter than them with things that they can't research with the same degree of certainty that I can. I don't think that's fair. But the point that I'm making is that in the preseason game between the Mavericks and the Lakers, Gabe Vincent scored like 20 points on Cooper Flagg in the first quarter because he had to guard, because they had him at fake point guard, and he had to guard at the point of attack. And I wasn't impressed by it at all. Like, I know I specifically said that, but I was just watching the game and I was like, damn, like you just got your face fried by Gabe Vincent. What about when it's like somebody who's actually good? Gabe Vincent isn't even good. Cooper Flagg's best defensive traits are like off ball feel and like cleaning up for really like from like the weak side. Using him on the ball as a defender further nullifies his one of his best traits. It's like playing like Giannis from like when he really used to guard a couple years ago at point of attack. I remember there's a game. It was like a Sunday afternoon game, I believe, that they were playing the Mavericks, and Luka Doncic was like calling for the screen to draw switches on Giannis, who at this point was like defensive player of the year, like one of the best defenders in the world, but it was all off of off ball value. And Luka was like specifically like calling out or like drawing switches on him because putting a off ball defender on the ball. The same with a guy like Jaden McDaniel. Well, no, not kind of with Jaden McDaniels, and for sure with like Robert Covington is another example. Historically, taking off ball defenders and putting them on ball decreases their value somewhere between like marginally and substantially. And if that's the plan for Cooper Flagg, then he's just further going to end up being in a worse place than he should be based off of roster construction. And this is stuff that isn't really actually his fault. And in a more optimized situation, it wouldn't affect him. In preseason, he shot 44.7% effective field goal percentage, which is not including free throws. I will once again get to Cooper Flagg in the way that he might utilize the free throw line in his career. I don't think that this roster is catered to him at all. I spoke on why playing with 3 other ball handlers and versatile shooters is beneficial not only to Flagg but to basically every player in basketball, to the point where if that's your elite roster construction, you might be just a guy. If you're supposed to play with a bunch of people who can dribble and pass and shoot, like, yeah, that's awesome. Everybody can play with them. I hope that. Oh yeah, in preseason he shot really poorly from the field. The offense was just not good when he was on the floor for Dallas, and also he didn't get any offensive rebounds, which is something I'm really nervous about because that is a part of how he, as a wing, would at Duke at least, or as a 4 wing. That's how a way that he returned some offensive value when he couldn't score from 2 in any effective way, and he was very reluctant to shoot 3s. He would offensive rebound above like positional averages. And in the point guard stunt that was pulled in preseason with the Mavericks, he offensive rebounded about a little bit better than Rob Dillingham, who is the smallest player in the league as far as height and weight are concerned, like in frame and frame in general. And he offensive rebounded like a little bit better than him. On the defensive glass, he was fine, but he was always a very good defensive rebounder. That's one of Flagg's best traits, and not something that will probably be affected by anything except for putting him at the point of attack once again. Or maybe that's an indicator that it didn't affect him that much doing that in preseason, because his defensive rebounding rate was still really high. I'm just very nervous about Cooper Flagg's going to be able to do on offense, and that is why, in researching players who also struggled to score efficiently on offense, but also were very turnover averse, I did some research and said, how does players like this score the ball, or like what happens to them in the pace and space era? So that's since like 2014, and this is where we see that Cooper Flagg may one day end up foul baiting, and he might end up using a combination of I was supposed to do this. I was supposed to look this up to or create some research on this where I have a hypothesis that high draft picks have higher free throw rates than players than otherwise equal players. Like basically, like the league is like you were destined to get these foul calls when you were drafted. The query that I used on StatHead was sub 6 offensive rebound percentage, so non bigs, sub 52 effective field goal percentage, which is just players who don't really score the ball all that efficiently, in a sub 3.5 3-point rate, which indicates players who are not like bombing threes or getting up really any substantial 3-point volume within their diet. And then from there, just players who don't turn the ball over. So a 12 turnover percentage is on the lower end. And I found that Jimmy Butler and DeMar DeRozan are two players whose offensive games are somewhat based on this concept that I can't really score like that. I guess DeRozan is like a very good long mid-range shooter, but that's just not all that good of a shot for someone who's gonna constantly speak about Morey ball in this exhibition in this video. And yeah, Jimmy Butler. If Cooper Flagg is 6'9", Jimmy Butler, that's a Hall of Famer, and he's the best, most likely the best player in most draft classes, and I would kind of end up being wrong. Where I think this would fail him, this method, is that you would actually, I think that it would cause him to be an even worse, an even less effective or efficient scorer without free throws. I learned this when I did my research on Taylor Horton Tucker, who finished pretty well at the rim when he was in college at Iowa State as an 18-year-old, 17-year-old at some points in the season. Freshman, and once he got to the league, he hasn't been all that good of a rim finisher yet because he's increased his free throw rate pretty substantially. Well, he had before he's currently over in the Euro League, and we'll be back soon. The Revenge of Taylor Horton Tucker. Go read that. Again, I assume you've already read it. But if when you change the method of your driving tendencies from I'm going to make a layup to I'm trying to get 2 free throws, you're going to, use different angles. You try to make different, create contact as opposed to creating the best opportunity to actually finish shots. I don't know what Cooper Flagg's and one rate was, and that's probably one of the best statistical indicators that's only on Synergy. So if I was gonna use Synergy, I would use it to look up his and one rate, and if it was high or low, and on his career as well, I think that would be something worth looking into. Maybe somebody will get back to me on that, or maybe I'll just post about it later when I don't feel like I'm cheating the people by using Synergy. Also, Jimmy Butler was way, way better at drawing fouls than Flagg was at any point in time at Duke. Jimmy Butler is a Hall of Fame grifter. The way that he plays is completely not based on having a bag or really all that much like scoring skill. It's just all about getting to the line and pump fakes and stuff like that. And that's why watching him play is really, like, as from an entertainment perspective, it sucks. And if Jimmy Butler's your favorite player, that's really weird. And I don't understand what your principles are as far as being a fan of the game. If Flagg is unable to parlay his high draft slot and his potential method that he may have to adopt in order to score from 2 in the league, it would actually really not end up looking very well for him because, once again, Jimmy Butler is the premier foul baiter going back from when he was at Marquette and all the way until now. He shot 11 free throws in a quarter or something. I didn't watch the first game of the season. I was asleep. But if it takes that for Cooper Flagg, I think that would be a failure of his offensive development. even if it ends up working out as far as effectiveness is concerned, I feel like that would be a disappointing outcome. But it's also a possible one for someone who I don't think has a bag at all. DeMar DeRozan, I think, presents an interesting like a scaled down version, and DeMar DeRozan's offensive peak just really wasn't all that high actually. So if the best offense that we get is like DeMar DeRozan from Cooper Flagg, if the best offensive process that we get from Cooper Flagg is DeMar DeRozan probably as like a slightly better passer, it might be okay, but we'd have to still. It might be okay in a vacuum if the defense ends up projecting as well as I hope that it will. But DeMar DeRozan would be kind of a bad outcome, and then I would start to probably be confident that another prospect came in my watch specifically, and maybe another guy could also end up surpassing Flagg in the class as far as career impact is concerned at their peaks. We can move on from Cooper Flagg. I think that I touched on every point I wanted to touch on about him in the draft notes. No, you can just read that because it's better to read. And then the best points, best points I brought up. Cool. We'll then move on to Dylan Harper, the number 2 pick in the class, who I had number 5. He playing with Wemby and Luke Cornett gravity and skill as bigs will benefit him, I'm pretty sure, massively, to the point where if I knew, and I guess I did know he was going to go number 2, but could I have ranked him higher? I maybe could have had him at 3 at the highest, and like no lower than 7. I forgot to add that. I'm also going to republish my master notes, and I'm going to have the ranges for all the players. I guess I'll do that after I make the video. But Harper, his range would be from like 3 to probably doesn't get past 7 or 8, especially playing with these players and accounting for that as his beginning of career team context. The player who I found most promising to compare to Dylan Harper was Jalen Williams, especially from the offensive profile. They have somewhat similar builds. Jalen Williams' wingspan is 3 inches longer, and his vertical is, I think, also 3 inches higher. But that's more of a praise to Williams than to say that at the guard position, Dylan Harper isn't humongous, and also like a very good athlete as well. Going into the season, I thought that Harper, based off of information that I was given about his profile, that he was gonna that he wasn't gonna create any stocks, and he was basically just gonna be like RJ Barrett, kind of like. That's what I went into the season expecting, and then he went on to finish, especially like later in the season, like accumulate stocks at like a really high level, which impresses me that he both utilizes his length and size the way that he does on the defensive end, especially with the offensive load that he carried, as well as maybe it was just that, maybe it wasn't 2 things. His size and versatility will aid him at the next level massively. And here in the sheet, you can see the in both of their final seasons in college, they had pretty similar offensive play type distributions or impacts on their team when they were on the floor. Dylan Harper, what's like the main difference? Is that in... Yeah, shooting off the dribble jumpers. They didn't really do that for Santa Clara, where when Dylan Harper was on the floor at what's it called, the Rutgers, there was a lot of settling for for off the dribble shots. I think where not even close. I think where Harper is clearly better than Jalen Williams is as an actual pick and roll ball handler and really just like a primary initiator in general, like a point guard. I prefer saying primary initiator maybe because I think it makes me sound smarter, or maybe because it's actually a very useful, it's a more useful term in delineating offensive team process as opposed to point guard, because point guards, there's point guards who are point guards by title and they do completely different things. Yeah, that's why primary initiator is a better term. And that Harper is a much better pick and roll handler, much more potent pick and roll handler than Jalen Williams will, especially was at the time, but also probably will ever be. Yeah, I would argue that um, Harper will be able to play to accumulate like the counting stats that will make other people love him all the time, while also being extremely turnover averse for someone who had the ball so much on a bad team, on a generally untalented team at Rutgers. To not turn the ball over at the degree he did is like, it's like Shea, Jalen Williams, like it's at an extremely outlier level, and that's why I think that Dylan Harper could be a role player star. I don't think that his best utility would be in like using him like Luka Doncic or James Harden or anything. I think that playing him in an offense or in an offensive situation where he does not have such high ball handling capabilities and initiating capabilities, I think that the rest of his ancillary skill set, like the stocks, which were better than expected, and like even his rebounding, will be will be further amplified, and he'll have a lot of he'll return very solid value from the second draft pick slot, which is not something that I'd be confident saying outside of the guys ahead of him, and maybe no, really only the players ahead of him, because behind him, like I guess Ryan Kalkbrenner could be the second best player in this class. I guess. I guess he could actually. Ryan Kalkbrenner is amazing. We'll talk about him later too. Um, Dylan Harper also, he doesn't have a floater, which isn't awesome, but he also never played with anybody who had I don't really need to talk about screen gravity as far as getting into a floater, but I think that his shot diet, the changes in his shot diet will end up being the most important change in his shot diet will be turning off dribble frequency, off the dribble middies, which was pretty high frequency, 70 percentile in college, into off the dribble threes, not unlike his teammate De'Aaron Fox. And once you just start bombing threes, even if you can't shoot, just keep shooting. I'll always profess that idea to any in all of my work. I hope that I say at least one thing about that. Um, just keep shooting. Always keep shooting. Never stop shooting. Don't shoot a pull up two. Just shoot a pull up three instead. Especially if you're Dylan Harper and you already have the ball and you have playmaking gravity that will cause you to be guarded in a certain way. Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be kind of the next development for Dylan Harper. For VJ Edgecombe, or smallest wing, that's the title that I would give him. If I was giving him like a evil nickname, I don't know. At playing at Baylor, which is a prospect, how do you call it? A prospect environment that has continuously failed to succeed at the professional level, even though Edgecombe was the first file other than Keontae George before him, Jeremy Sochan, I believe. He was not even supposed to go one and done. That wasn't even intended. Um, the other guys, Eves Missy and what's it? Jacoby Walter. Both of them had very poor rookie seasons where like they were like statistically just some of the worst players in the league, and not like bad rookies, like bad players. So if you go to Baylor and then you go to the league, it's we're working on a pretty solid sample size that you do not ever put out effective NBA basketball at your peak. VJ Edgecombe, I think, can get to neutral, but other than that, I think that there are too many things limiting his ceiling, his or the highest upside, to the point where being this third pick, it could work in a team context, but looking at him in comparison to other prospects later, I'm not exactly sure that he's gonna end up as the third pick. I had a query, and it states that if your offensive rebound is under 8%, your assist percentage is under 20%, you attempt less than 9 3-pointers per 100 possessions, and you had at least 20 dunks but finished sub 65% at the rim. Translated, this indicates what happens when a prospect can't finish at the rim outside of transition or open dunking lanes, like very quote unquote easy dunk attempting situations, but you also lack the size to influence offensive rebound success while not being able to run point guard or not being able to run primary initiator reps on offense, which is one that I think VJ could beat because he's done it in well, he hasn't played that many games in preseason, actually. I think in preseason at summer, I think he only played 4 games total, so he might not even, that might not be enough. But he was like like the assist percentage and stuff was like that of a primary handler. I didn't watch a single possession though. Like, I don't actually know if it was legitimate or not. And the stats for preseason aren't as like, they don't have like lineup data for preseason on the NBA website. So I'm just gonna go off the assist percentage and say that they kind of let him rock out and like play a quote unquote point guard, and then it worked a little bit. But he also doesn't. Okay, and then if you go and you look, none of these players have ever sustained like primary handler duties. The closest one is Jaylen Brown, and if like being Jaylen Brown, but like really small, if you're VJ Edgecombe, like with a small wingspan and like being generally very light, that's not going to work. I think that another comparison, you got Dort, Josh Green, Dion Waiters, Josh Okogie, Pat Williams, Zach LaVine, Archie Goodwin, and none of those are all that flattering of offensive. Of like general impact. I guess two-way Zach LaVine would be an okay outcome. But Zach LaVine ended up like bombing threes and ended up being really like one of the best 5 shooters in the world, which I could probably put past VJ Edgecombe, not fully, because he does have some okay shooting indicators, but like it's just unlikely to predict that a player will do that. A large part of VJ Edgecombe's appeal is as a two-way defensive playmaker, but when the blocks, when he stopped blocking shots, it doesn't look as cool. And he didn't block a shot in college basketball for over 7 weeks between, what are these dates? Between like the beginning of December and then 7 weeks after that, he did not block one shot. He blocked a couple of shots already, though, in preseason and summer league. So, I don't know. Maybe, it's probably fake. 7 weeks is way too long for that to be a real thing. And all of the blocks were against teams like Tarleton State and the University of New Orleans. Baylor Techs. I think there's a lot of positive concepts on VJ Edgecombe. I would point you to my great friend Ahmed. He wrote an article on VJ Edgecombe and blah, 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 what's the fella's name? San Diego State, Miles Bird, and we that was really like our first time working together on a research thing. He DM'd me and he was like, "Yo, like, what do you think about the difference between them?" And I was like, "Damn, VJ is better than him. His box plus minus is better." And this was in January, so you can progress your thoughts of, your process of learning if you want to pass. You're better because box plus minus. I think VJ Edgecombe's still a better prospect than Miles Bird. I would have had Miles Bird in the 30s if he would have stayed in this class, because he doesn't fit the physical. He doesn't hit like thresholds that I think that a guard wing probably needs to hit. in in uh in basketball, really, without being outlier shooter probably, and maybe Miles Bird can make some more shots for me this year, and then we can talk about it again. Let me see if there's anything specific I want to point out in Ahmed's analysis on him, other than just saying to go and check his out. The fourth pick, who's the fourth pick? Oh, Killer Kon Knueppel. Where's his notes? Just read his notes straight off the notes. I think Kon Knueppel is one of the most skilled prospects that we've seen in a pretty substantial amount of time. As far as the shooting ability, uh, like making reads, like playmaking. These are things that he's uh, at a glance very good at, as good as anyone, in fact. Specifically in scoring efficiency and the ability to create shots. People who were high, even people who had him higher than I did, believed that his lack of off the dribble 3 point volume at Duke was a worry as far as his actual handle and stuff like that, and I disagree because a basketball team is not constructed to highlight a specific player more than it's meant to win games. And Duke made it to the national championship. No, they didn't. They went to the Final Four. And yeah, it simply would not have benefited their roster for him to like bomb off the dribble 3 pointers. I think that I don't think his athletic indicators are as bad as they get. I believe he had 2 or 3 dunks this season. The other stuff was bad, but these are like the surface level analysis of Kon Knueppel. These are things that you would see anybody say. My issue, and the reason I couldn't rank him even a little bit higher, is that without playing with one of the best possible pairings for his specific game, I I think that his translation will retain him from being able to guard, even though at his weight, because he measured like pretty heavy. I think also 220, which is the same as Cooper Flagg, but he's like much shorter, so he's going to be guarding down in lineup. So he should be able to utilize his weight to guard better than other players who are just as poorly athletically tested, just as poor athletes. That's so dumb when I said that like that. Just as bad of athletes as Kon. He'll be able to at least should be able to hopefully at least bump guys off spots and not just get ran straight through. Playing without Kaman Malawach was the issue for Kon Knueppel. He played 543 possessions versus top 80 teams without Malawach on the court, and his mid-range scoring decreased pretty heavily, and as well as his playmaking. Like his assist percentage dropped a solid amount as well. He was as well as his free throw rate decreasing, and his 3 point rate went up. What this indicates to me is that without Malawach on the floor, Kon had to resort to just shooting 3 pointers because there was no other way for him to gain the advantage to get downhill and even be able to set up from two and score. Over versus 200 top 220 comp, his assist percentage actually dropped even more heavily to like slightly above average when he played without Malawach. If it takes a Malawach screen, and also the team's offensive process changed like substantially when it was just Kon, no Malawach. Their rim attack playstyle frequency dropped by nearly 10%, while their dribble jumper and mid-range frequency ballooned with substantially below average efficiency. Meaning, not only did Kon within the constructs of a team's impact really struggle playing without Malawach, he also damn, bro, how do I keep leaving my sentences like this? I gotta stop speaking in dependent clauses, or I gotta finish it off if I'm gonna forget what I'm gonna say. I'll do better next time. 2026, that's my year. Kon could still be a neutral defender based off of the positional size and weight, but playing without Malawach, I think this skill may only take him so far as to where I'll have him ninth in on my board. If Ryan Kalkbrenner is able to give him a similar outlet as a screener, then maybe his range could be slightly higher, but I don't think I could ever get him probably past probably past 6 in this class. I would prefer the second round pick, who I just was talking about, his new teammate, Ryan Kalkbrenner. I'd probably prefer him in basically any context. Yeah. I made it through 4 picks, and it's been an hour. I'm going to try this, and then I'm going to try to run it back and run through the rest of the draft. Yeah, cool. We'll stop right about here when I wave my arms.